Hello there! Welcome back to the Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, exclusive to WHSmith.
Some dark secrets are laid bare in our latest bestseller.
Yes, the scene of domestic bliss presented to us is certainly not all it seems.
Tyler's legs were pulled up into her body and the boy was laughing at something she'd said.
The girls, Lisa Jewell.
Pip wondered how old he was, where he lived, if they were boyfriend and girlfriend. As she watched, the back gate of one of the flats across the lawn opened and 3 tall, thin girls emerged, one after the other. It was the strange sisters with the weird hair. They walked in height order, loosely, scuffing at the gravel on the path with old sneakers. The smallest one picked up her pace as she neared Tyler and the boy. The other 2 trailed behind. And then, virtually telepathically, they arranged themselves into a horseshoe huddle around the bench, a silent choreography. Pip saw Tyler nod in their direction. The boy and the sisters all turned to look at them, and then they looked away again. "Come on," said Grace, "I'm cold." Pip followed her big sister back across the lawn and down the gravelled path that led back to their back gate, and as she did, she heard the garden whisper in their wake. It talked to itself about the things it knew, the secrets it held close within its pathways and crannies, its bowers and corners. It whispered about the people who lived behind the closed doors and the insular group of children on the bench, and of the days yet to come when the warmth of summer would bring it all back to life.
It's time to meet another best-selling author.
On the Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, exclusive to WHSmith.
The Richard and Judy Book Club. Join in the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and at whsmith.co.uk.
If you've ever wondered what goes on in those communal gardens that you see in some cities, especially in London, where all the houses surround the gardens, big old gardens, and only the residents have the key to get through the gates into them. If you've ever wondered what goes on there, whether the residents get on with each other, whether the kids get on with each other, whether anybody's harbouring any dark secrets, well, the girls will let you in on this.
What I liked about this book was it didn't kind of hold back on the darkness, and it starts almost at once with an incredibly violent scene. There's been a wonderful day's partying in this garden that you described, Judy. All the residents are out there. They're having a wonderful summer party. It's a big annual event. It's like Fete Day on the village green. And then as the sun sets and it gets dark and cool, suddenly a terrible discovery is made. And it's of one of the 2 sisters at the heart of this book who's been horribly attacked.
Who's only 13.
She's 13 years old, and she's found lying under bushes and shrubbery in a dark corner of the park. And there's a dark echo of an almost identical attack 30 years before, and we're off. We're off on this investigation, on this mystery tour, this dark mystery tour. Is it connected to what happened before?
And is the perpetrator still living in that same communal square?
Absolutely. Is there a serpent in paradise, and has it been lurking there for 3 decades? It's a wonderful story.
Hello, I'm Lisa Jewell and I'm the author of The Girls. I have, I think, an absolutely fantastic routine for writing, which means I get all my words written within an hour and a half to 3 hours every day. The secret to this way of writing is to completely disconnect yourself from the internet completely. So instead of writing at home, which I used to do, where I would sit in front of my computer for 8 hours and then tear all my hair out at the end of the day because I hadn't written anything and I'd spent all day buying things on eBay, I now take my computer out of the house and go and sit in a cafe. I do not ask for the Wi-Fi password, and within an hour and a half to 3 hours I've written my 1,000 words. The rest of the day then is free to do other writerly things like writing articles or doing editing, and I get to do the school run as well. So yeah, I have a fantastic writing routine. I generally don't start with an opening line. For me, the real seed of the story is, it can be a question like, what if? For example, with The Girls, it was, what if my children who live on a communal garden went on a sleep out in a tent in the garden in the middle of the night and something bad happened? Would I still trust my neighbours? So it's usually a question that I need an answer to. What if this happened? What is the worst case scenario? How would this person react to this situation? What motivates me to write more than anything is that every day of my life I see stories everywhere I go. Every conversation I have with another person Every time I pick up a newspaper, every time I listen to a piece of music, there's some sort of inspiration there. And once a seed of a story has been sowed, you have no option other than to plant that seed and follow the story to the very end. When I was a child, I wanted to be a writer. I spent my entire life, as I think most writers did, with their head in a book. My head under the duvet with a torch at 2 o'clock in the morning, finishing books. As a young teenager and older teenager, I was fairly obsessed with the idea of being a music journalist. I was very, very into music at that time. And I kind of stopped reading novels and was more reading the NME. So that was my big dream, was I was going to be a music journalist. As it happened, I went off completely on a tangent. I ended up working in the fashion industry for quite a few years. And when I came out of the fashion industry, I started working as a secretary. And it wasn't until my late 20s when I revisited the idea of being a writer myself. I don't think I felt it was fair or reasonable to call myself a writer until I started writing my second book. I think I felt very much the first book was an experiment. It was my year out that I'd never had, my gap year, take a year out and do something a bit crazy, write a book. So I never felt that I was a writer until somebody gave me some money and said, now we would like you to go and write another book. At that point I thought it was fair enough to call myself a writer. I think that if you've got an itch to write, and you're feeling that it's not your place to write. I felt that way for quite a long time. I felt it was not my place to write. I hadn't had enough experience, I wasn't mature enough or interesting enough or clever enough. I think you should just set yourself a challenge, and I think you should maybe undertake it with another person who's going to egg you on and cheer you on, which is what I had. I had 2 or 3 people who made me feel that I wasn't being ludicrous, and it was a perfectly reasonable thing to do to try and write a book. So get somebody on your side, get them to encourage you, and just see it as a challenge. See it as something that you're going to take some time out of your life, find some time in your day to do it, and just see how you go.
You live on a communal garden square where your children run free. You've known your neighbours for years, you trust them implicitly. You think your children are safe, but are they really? Midsummer night and a girl is found unconscious in a dark corner of the garden. What happened to her and who is responsible? It's great, Lisa. I really enjoyed it. And the actual garden square that we're talking about is one of these lovely sort of things that we all see if we're going through London, where these all the residents in a particular square have access to the garden.
Yes.
So nobody has a private garden, but it's private for all of the residents.
Yes, well, there are 2 types. There's the ones where the houses face onto the garden, so the front door, so you have to cross the road to get into the garden square, or there's the one that, like the one in this book, where it's your back door that opens onto the garden, so they're completely swallowed up by the houses and you can't see them from the street. They're completely secret.
Yeah.
What I loved about reading it is the square itself, this lovely garden itself, it's like a character in its own right, isn't it, in the book? It's a personality.
Very much so, and that was completely deliberate, because I've been living on a communal garden like that for many years.
I thought you must be.
Always wanted to write about it.
Yeah.
And my earlier books were much more sort of romantic and light-hearted, and had I written about it then, I'd have probably just ended up recreating my communal garden person for person and story for story. But now my books have changed over the last few books and become darker.
Right.
But it's sort of like living around a village green, isn't it? Really?
It's exactly like
life,
it. It's exactly what it's like. There's even a path, a little pathway that runs all the way around, and people walk around the path and they wave at you over your garden gate.
Yeah.
And you can see into the backs of people's houses, so you feel very intimately involved with all your neighbours, because you're so much part of the same space.
Yeah, so it's, in a sense, the garden acts almost like a stage, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a kind of centre stage for everything to happen.
Yes.
And for the dark secrets to emerge from these couples who've been friends for years, know each other, the children are in and out of each other's houses all the time. So tell us about the girls, the 2 girls, Pip and Grace.
So Pip and Grace are sisters. They're very close in age. When they arrive in the garden, they're 11 and 12 years old. They've had to leave their nice big house in Hampstead for very sad reasons to do with their father. And this is their new start. And so they're living with their mother Claire, who's essentially a single mother at the beginning of the story. And they're very close-knit, Grace and Pip, because they're very close in age, but they're also at that turning point. They're 11 and 12, and Grace is about to turn 13, and she's starting to pull away a bit from the family unit. And so she's offered this opportunity on this communal garden, but making new friendships with these kids who've grown up on these gardens. A lot of these kids have been there since they were newborn babies and have known each other since they were toddlers and played with each other for all those years. And Grace has the confidence to go out there and become part of the gang, kind of leaving Pip behind a bit, who's younger and doesn't quite trust this clique of tweens and teens. And so she kind of holds back, and you see her view of the people in the garden in the letters that she writes to her estranged father.
And she's quite suspicious of the seemingly very genial parents, and particularly the paterfamilias father figure of another family with whom her older sister plays. Because although you write him as being quite sort of lovable and a comforting figure, is he? The younger girl, Pip, thinks he's a bit creepy in the way that he uses his hands, the way he places his hands on people. She suspects him, doesn't she? Before the terrible thing happens that actually happens.
I think he's her prime suspect, because he behaves in a way that she doesn't associate with fathers. He's way too involved with the teenagers on the garden. He knows way too much about what's going on with them. He's very physical, he's very touchy. And she can also see that Grace, her older sister, who is denying that she is missing her own father, but clearly has a huge father-shaped hole in her life. She can see that Grace is becoming overly attached to this.
And attracted to him as well.
And attracted in a very strange way in which a 13-year-old girl...
So to cut to the chase, very quickly, so to cut to the chase here, very early on, poor Grace is found virtually killed. In the garden after a huge community party that's been going on all day. Midsummer fun, all the rest of it. Struck me a bit like the Wicker Man, actually.
Well, it's got that kind of vibe to it, hasn't it? The dark side of children.
It's getting dark, and Grace is found in the bushes in a very bad way.
Yes, exactly. She's unconscious. Her face is covered in blood. Her clothes have been ripped asunder, and that's all we know for the majority of the book. It's not until the very end that we find out what happened.
What happened, but also gradually as the book evolves, we become aware that this isn't the first time that this has happened.
There's a dark undercurrent of a story, a very similar story of another young girl, a 14-year-old girl who has a bench dedicated to her in the garden because she died
30 years before.
Yes, 30 years before. She died at the age of 14, was found dead in the garden in a very similar place and situation to Grace.
So is it the same?
And exactly, and there is a character who has returned from the past, has been living in Africa for many years, and Gordon, the father, the grandfather of some of the children, who has recently returned. So,
well, it was a really absorbing story, which is why it's on the list. To be honest,
thank you.
It was really good. It was, I'm not sorry, Judy. You want to come in?
No, I just wanted to ask about your own neighbours.
Yes.
I mean, you live on a communal square, and you write this dark, disturbing novel about the characters some of the characters who live on the square. They must all have read it by now, haven't they? Your neighbours?
I think some of them have read it. I'm not convinced that all of them know that I'm a writer.
Anonymity.
Yes, I'm just mum. The mum.
Right.
So you haven't had any sort of abusive mail shoved under the letterbox?
No, I was so careful to keep everything so far removed. I gave a proof to my nearest neighbour, the one who feeds our cats while we were away.
He will now poison your cats while you're away.
My husband saw her pass it to her neighbour 2 doors down, saying, "Oh, look, I've got Lisa's new book for you." And the neighbour said, "Oh, fantastic. Is it good?" She said, "Oh, it's not as good as the last one." So, yes, that's the only feedback I've had from the neighbours.
It's weird when you write about sort of literally your own backyard almost. I write a lot about Cornwall, and we've got a place down there, and you've really, really got to watch what you're doing.
You have to be forensic about it. You have to go through every last detail in your head and just make sure it doesn't cross-reference with anything that happened in real life.
No. How old are your children?
They are 8 and 12.
Right.
So, in fact, they were. The oldest was 10 when I wrote this book, so I was just on the cusp of where I'm at now, really.
So this is sort of your 20th anniversary of writing, isn't it? Didn't you first write in 1996?
I started writing my first novel in 1996.
Yeah,
Gosh,
like
I hadn't
20 years ago.
Yes, 20 years
and
since
you did
I
it for
started
a bet.
writing.
You did it for a
That's
bet.
correct, yes. I had just been made redundant. I was a secretary.
How many writers start their life story like that?
Yes,
I've just been laid off.
Yes, exactly. It's a good place to be for a lot of people, laid off. I'd just been made redundant. I was a secretary, and I was on holiday with some friends, and one of whom was a journalist, and she was asking me what I wanted to do when I got home from the holiday, given that I didn't have a job to go back to. And I said, I'm going to sign up with a temping agency and get some temping work. She said, there must be something else you'd really like to do. And I said, well, I'd quite like to write a book. So she made me a bet. She said, I know so many people who've told me they want to write a book. If I had a penny for every writer, every person who told me that, blah, blah, blah. And so she said, just go home, take a month before you sign up with an agency, write 3 chapters, and if you do that, I'll take you out for dinner to your favourite restaurant. So I did. I took a month. I wrote the 3 chapters. I gave them to her, and she took me out for dinner to my favourite restaurant.
Which was?
It was a restaurant in Shepherd's Bush called Isan Kiao on the Uxbridge Road. Very unglamorous, but the best Thai food in London.
Okay. So really, you owe it to her. You owe this new career to her.
Yes,
Gosh.
indeed. Really, really.
Well, I think we all need a mentor of some
essentially owe
kind.
it to her. Yes.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have happened without her.
Well, when I finish mine, you can take me out somewhere. But I don't think I fancy Thai. I fancy something French.
French?
Cologne d'Or.
Okay, I'll take you to Paris.
Oh,
How's that?
perfect.
There you go. So I'm just trying to trump you, that's all. Hey, congratulations anyway. It's a really good
book.
read.
Good.
I don't know
Thank
what
you.
your neighbour's doing, saying it's not as good as the last one. Because, well, I mean, in that case, the last one must be sensational because this is great. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Meanwhile, obviously you can go to any outlet you like to buy Lisa's wonderful book, but if you get it from WHSmith, you get a special version, a special edition of it, because in the back of all our book club books, as sold with WHSmith, there's extra content in the back. There's a lot of stuff about the author, there's an author's Q&A, all kinds of things going on. So, you know, if it was me, I'd go to WHSmith.
Kate Atkinson is my favourite novelist of the moment. I think she's brilliant. Her newest book is God in Ruins, which I think is a work of genius, but I would say to everyone, read Life After Life first and then read God in Ruins. As a piece, they are perfect.
There's a short story writer who I'm obsessed with at the moment, who is Anton Chekhov. And Chekhov, of course, in the West is renowned as a playwright, but in Russia he's revered almost in a saintly way as a short story writer. We're talking about stories that were written in the late 19th century, but the spirit in them is completely modern. They could have been written yesterday. They are magnificent creations and had a phenomenal influence on world literature.
At the moment, I'm reading, and it's the Norwegian writer, but I don't know how to say his name correctly. Knausgaard, Karl Ove. He's written 6 books that are kind of like memoirs or novels, looking at his life, and he does so in a really, really raw, uncompromising way. He doesn't shy away from mistakes in his past. I find his writing fascinating because he can write about making a cup of tea and make it sound utterly you're so absorbed by it.
I have a lot of favorite books. The book I've probably read and reread the most is a book called The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which was published in 1939, and he won the Pulitzer for it that year, later the Nobel. It's still one of my favorite books.
Megan Abbott continues to impress me. What really appeals to me are writers with a very distinctive voice, so Megan Abbott will be one of those. Dennis Lehane. There are a few Northern Irish writers that are starting to emerge that I think deserve more attention, and Adrian McKenty's raised his profile a lot in the last few years. There's Brian McGilloway, Jared Brennan, Steve Kavanagh. There are a list of writers emerging from Northern Ireland, and there's a bit of a wave right now. I think we're going to see some interesting things from that part of the world.
So I've just read a book called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, who was a surgeon in the States who started to feel unwell and then was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and died quite quickly. I know that sounds quite bleak, but the book is so fascinating and it's so interesting on how it feels to be a doctor who becomes a patient. He's a beautiful writer. It's full of fabulous reflections about life.
And coming up next time, we relive the horror of the nuclear bombing of Nagasaki in 1945.
And so I was paying for a tin of mandarin oranges when a new light flooded our world. Those who dare to ask me how I survived Picadon are rewarded with the same answer: a sweet tooth. My humour unnerves them. The truth is less glib. Nagasaki saved me. Its geography contained the power of the explosion to a third of the city, mostly the Urakami district and part of downtown.
We'll tell you about a dictionary of mutual understanding on the next episode.